was going to say good morning, but somebody just pointed out to me that it is now afternoon. So good afternoon, everybody. So nice to see so many of you here. So hello and welcome to the York Festival Ideas. I've been involved with this for a few years now. They asked me to come and give a talk a few years ago, and I thought it was such a wonderful event that I've invited myself back on an annual basis since then. My name's Julian Richards, and I'll be chairing the event today. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Kevin Leahy, a National Finds Advisor to the British Museum's Portable Antiquities scheme, which some of you may have heard, a scheme for making sure that people notify their treasure finds. Now, for 29 years, you were the archaeologist in North Lincolnshire Museum, and at a time when anybody should have respectively retired, you decided to embark on a new career and working at the British Museum. Kevin's excavated many important Anglo-Saxon sites, and we were reminiscing about the last time we had a chat, which was when in the olden days, when we were both not quite so grey-haired, when Kevin contributed to the Viking series that I did for BBC. And today Kevin's going to talk to us about 4 very important Anglo-Saxon cemeteries and about the stories that those cemeteries can tell. And I think this is the key thing. We both believe archaeology is about telling stories. So, Kevin, over to you.
Can we turn the lights down, please? You shouldn't clap in advance, just in case you don't like it, because you can't take it back. The light's going down. It's less embarrassing for anyone who dozes off. The hidden valley, Anglo-Saxons in Winterton Vale. Who would think that there'd be a hidden valley in Lincolnshire? It's not so much that it's hidden, it's unnoticed. It doesn't even have a name in the landscape, but it is a real place. To put us in place on the 1824 Ordnance Survey map, which is nearer the Anglo-Saxons than we are. Here is the Humber estuary, running out to the North Sea down here. There's the River Trent, down here. And here is what I call Winterton Vale. It's a valley between Lincoln Edge, the north-south limestone escarpment that runs right down through Lincolnshire, and on the other side is the Liassic escarpment, flanking the Trent. It's a true valley with an incredible natural environment. The land in here is good. It's grade 2 on the DEFRA scale. It's good land, which attracts settlement. The other thing about this area is it has phenomenally good communications. Through the Trent down into the English Midlands, the Ouse up into Yorkshire, and the North Sea can be found through the Humber. It's a really beneficial environment. Through Winterton Vale runs Winterton Beck, the stream that gives it its name. It's got an abundant water supply from that stream and the springs that come down off Lincoln Edge to keep it going. It's a very good environment that's attracted settlement right back to the Mesolithic and earlier. To give you an idea that it's a true valley, that is Lincoln Edge. We're looking east from the bottom of the vale. The cemetery is on the top here. Looking the other way, looking towards the west, this is across the vale, and that is the Liassic escarpment. A true little valley, unmarked by a name, but there it is. Well, the first records we've got of archaeology in the area is William Stukely's visit on the 24th of July, 1724. On the 17th of July this year, I intend to get riotously drunk to celebrate. Stukely drew Countess Close, an earthwork which he put down as Roman castle called Countess Close. Modern opinion is that it's not Roman. I agree with Stukely. I think it is Roman. It's certainly not medieval, though medieval material has been found in the ditch. Morphologically, this looks like a Roman Saxon shore fort, and it can be paralleled with a similar earthwork at Yarborough Camp at Croxton that I'll refer to later. I think that is a late Roman fortification. Then we've got the Winterton Roman Villa, discovered in the mid-18th century. Fine mosaics being put in the 4th century. You'd think, being so close to the Humber, they'd be a bit concerned about incursions from across the North Sea. But these people felt secure enough to spend a lot of money on mosaics. The villa was a big one. Work done by Roger Goodburn, excavating the villa's infrastructure, showed that this was a major agricultural complex. And remember, you've got large amounts of grain being produced in the Vale, and with the links to the rivers, you can sell it. You can take the grain out to York, down to Lincoln, and across to the Rhine garrison. No wonder this area was prosperous. They had both assets and the way to market it. Always follow the money. That's Winterton Villa. This is the major Romano-British site at Dragonby, excavated by Geoffrey May. A big, prosperous site, also in the Vale of Ancombe. When you look at the 1824 Ordnance Survey map, the landscape is pretty much as Stukely would have seen it. Little changed. But in the mid-19th century, a big change came when ironstone was discovered on Scunthorpe and Frodingham Warren. Ironstone was discovered and extraction began. They took away enormous amounts of ironstone from the area. The ironstone was covered by blown sand, which needed to be removed, like that. These are sand wheelers, taking off the sand overburden, plus a lot of archaeology to dump it on the other side to bear the ironstone ready for extraction. This was a terrible job. I wouldn't want to do a risk assessment on this. I did say in one book that I wrote that the Lincolnshire Wolds looked like Hobbiton with a gentle rolling landscape. This, folks, looks like Mordor. I mean, it's terrible. They went through a lot of the landscape and destroyed a lot of material. Scunthorpe Museum did what it could to recover and record material. The B1, B2, B3 are benches as the ironstone mines advanced, taking off the sand to reveal the archaeology, and people from the museum, Harold Dudley and his daughters, recorded what was coming out of this landscape. Things like the Thielby hoard of Roman pottery was found. There was a lot of pottery kilns there. This unprepossessing object is the base of a Roman smelter for smelting iron. There's good iron there, as was being extracted in the 19th century and was being extracted in the Roman period. They also found an Anglo-Saxon cemetery. Very little was recovered, just 2 pots, but I'll say more about that later. There is the site that I'm going to talk about. It's up there. Down here are the worked-out ironstone mines, down at the bottom. This is Sheffield's Hill, best known as one of the type sites of the Mesolithic. There's massive quantities of flint off there. I've done a little bit of work up there to try and improve the quality of the record, because all we know is that these flints came from this area. A very important site. In the early 1990s, a couple of metal detector users started to work up there, and I didn't fancy their chances. I thought, well, they might pick up a few interesting flints, but they're not going to get anything else. So they worked away, and then they found a dispersed Roman coin hoard. These coins are disgusting. They are of 1st and 2nd century date and almost completely worn away. They got a coin hoard, which was interesting, and then things began to get still more interesting. They began to pick up pieces of Anglo-Saxon pottery, metalwork, 6th century date. Well, unfortunately, in Lincolnshire, like most of eastern England, we're used to seeing ploughed out Anglo-Saxon cemeteries. They're coming up all the while. I drew the stuff, made a note on the file, and forgot about it. And then, one Sunday morning, the two detectives, Glyn and Craig, turned up at my home in high excitement. They'd made a discovery. They'd found 2 gold and garnet pendants, one of which was lying on the top. This is a 7th century grave that's been ploughed out. Now, we've got a lot of 6th century graves. The 7th century isn't so well known, so this was very important. I sent the detectives out there with their wives' flower sieves because I wanted that gem out of the centre. And they settled down and spent a week out there sieving the soil to find that pendant. They were really good. And they didn't find the centre of the pendant. They found these 7th century type beads and an amethyst bead, another type from the 7th century. Well, something needed to be done. This was clearly an important site, and it was being destroyed. It was being destroyed by erosion. The sand was blowing away, being dumped on the A1077 up here, and effectively lowering the ground level. And the plough was biting ever deeper into the cemetery. The other thing that was going on was rabbit activity on an epic scale. So we decided to excavate it, and I gathered together a band of volunteers, and we started to dig. This is the excavation. We topsoiled by hand for most of the excavation. In the end, we got a mini digger in to extend out to make sure we got the lot. But we took the topsoil off by hand, which meant there was a good recovery of material from the topsoil. Here is Yorkshire, on the other side of the Humber. We know it's there, but we try not to think about it. But this gives you what the site was like. The graves showed up beautifully in the sandy subsoil. This caused a bit of a problem at the time. Look at this double line, which I initially put down as being signs of a coffin within the grave, which would have been interesting. It was only in the post-excavation, when I started to write it up, I realised what was really going on. These were rabbit burrows. The rabbits found digging easier in the disturbed fill of the grave than they did in the rest of it. So they followed the edge of the grave. The good news is they were also lazy that they didn't go down through the base of the grave. So most of the deposits still remained intact on the bottom of the fill. The soil is ferociously acidic. In most of the graves, even the teeth failed to survive. But we did get pseudomorphs, sand men like this. That's his spearhead on the top of his head. This is caused, I think, by firstly the soft tissue decays, then the bone decays that locally raises the pH, allowing the precipitation of mineral salts to give this shadow of the body. It's not like material trickling in or plaster casts as they got at Pompeii. The acid conditions meant that some organic materials survived very well, probably because corrosion set in so quickly that copper salts were released to preserve things like textiles. I mean, the weave on this is just incredible. We think that it'll be possible to even identify the colour of some of these garments preserved. The downside of this was that we couldn't ferret around excavating these grave groups with textile remains in it on site. They all had to be lifted en bloc on sheets of steel to be treated as laboratory excavations at the York Archaeological Trust, which gave us a really good view after the event, but my poor diggers never saw what they were getting out. Graves like Grave 1, woman's grave, no skeletal remains, but you can see her brooches here, an iron ring, iron knife, brooches like Anglian cruciform brooch found in this grave. Typical 6th century burial. There were some remarkable things. Superb gilt copper alloy brooch, sleeve clasps, mark of an Anglian rather than a Saxon woman. This object with the strange glowering face in the middle was originally a pinhead, but they broke the shaft of the pin off and soldered brooch fittings on the back of it. But really good 6th century material, but nothing that was particularly early. The beads are superb. Great festoons of beads. Many amber beads, glass beads. Again, a really good 6th century cemetery. The men's graves contained weapons. Here's grave 8, shield boss, and a spearhead. Good 6th century grave. This is the best find I found in 50 years of archaeology. This is a shield boss from grave 115. It was in a terrible state. Getting it out, we used the steel plate, and it came out intact. Came over here to York for conservation, and I had an excited phone call from Julie Jones when she started to clean it and saw what was on the apex of the shield. It's decorated with Anglo-Saxon style 1 animals. I won't try and explain them now. Inlaid with garnets and probably glass. Gilded, really nice. This is the best thing I've ever found in excavation. It's a lozenge-shaped, diamond-shaped hole. That, folks, is the tip of a thrown spear. These people were not mucking around with their weapons. They were playing for keeps. I don't think that the warrior survived the encounter because the central boss was knocked off centre by the impact. And one of the mounts that were set either side of the boss, which one is it? This one, had got a scar on it, had been dented. I think that damage would have been repaired if he'd survived the encounter. But this incredible preservation of material. We've got the wood preserved from the shield board, and the leather facing that covered it is also preserved, and a strap on the back of the shield that he used to sling over his shoulder. Topsoiling by hand meant we recovered a lot of pottery from the topsoil. And I went into print at the time and said that we've got a settlement nearby to get this amount of pottery. This is our plot of where the pottery was being found. You can see its colour temperature. The red spots are the active spots. And then I began to look in more detail at it, and there was a correlation between these hot spots and children's graves. The children's grave, we also got 2 cremations. This is one of them. You see the bits of burnt human bone, badly ploughed out. That one is down there, 27. We've got the children's graves, most of which contain a pot. And I think what we've got there is shallow children's graves that have been ploughed out. So we've not got a settlement. Another theory disappears into the mist. Now, here, at Sawcliffe, we've got 2 cemeteries. You've already heard about the 6th century cemetery here. Typical, fairly rich 7th century cemetery, 6th century cemetery with 2 burials within small ring ditches. And then 20 metres to the south, everything changes. This is a 7th century final phase grave cemetery. It's very typical of the conversion period when they were becoming Christian. The layout is different. These are pretty higgledy-piggledy. Most of the 7th century graves are orientated west-east. They tend to be laid out in rows. What really surprises me is the difference in depth. Most of the graves in the 6th century, well, the average is 65 centimetres deep, about like that. In the 7th century, it's 15 centimetres. That's why they were getting the gold objects in the topsoil, because the graves are incredibly shallow here. Was the depth of the grave supplemented by a small mound? It could be. That's why they're so shallow. But it's a good, rich cemetery. Say rich cemetery, it is remarkable. One of the features of the conversion period cemeteries is a shortage of grave goods. There's not much in the way of grave goods. Some graves are excessively rich, most are poor. They hadn't heard that at Sawcliffe. 86% of the graves contained grave goods. It's very rich. And by the standards of the time, there's a lot of weapons here. This is a special, posh cemetery. Groups like this, glass gems set in gold settings. The gems are remarkable. That is a Merovingian bead, cut in halves, with a garnet set in the centre of it. A really nice 7th century pendant. This is still more remarkable. It's got a lovely scroll decoration on it. This is an Iron Age bead they'd used, just like the bead found nearby at Wintringham with this world pattern on it. It's an Iron Age bead. This, with a tartan pattern, is another Iron Age bead, being used in the 7th century. We got 2 graves with swords in them. These were terrible to get out. They came out on a really bad day with a drying wind. Got them out using the steel plate method, and on X-ray, they're pattern welded. These were fine steel blades. Nothing left of the hilt. We could have hoped for something like this one from Market Raisin, a lovely 7th century sword hilt. Traces of horn, which is typical. Most swords seem to have been fitted with horn hilts. But 2 sword burials, then a few big, fine millefiori beads, some plain beads and the amethyst mentioned. But what's interesting is how much things had changed. The big arrays of grave goods we got in the 6th century, the big cruciform brooches, the big festoons of beads, the sleeve clasps were all gone. Women were dressing in a quite different manner. We don't know much about how the men were dressing, but feminine dress had changed completely. The beads, the big festoons were gone to be replaced by short strands of beads. The big brooches were gone to be replaced by simple annular brooches, often worn singly. Now, to get a revolutionary change in dress like that, influence of Christianity, there are changes elsewhere in Europe to a more simplified dress. I mean, where was this style of dress coming from? I think what we're looking at is a resurgence of Romano-British dress. That the big Germanic dress with the big brooches went out of fashion and the British population came back. They'd always been there. I did a back of an envelope calculation on the number, the size of the population represented by the Anglo-Saxon graves in Lindsey. And it's a population of about 4,000. You know, okay, we've got, I think about 12,000 graves. But if you divide that number of graves by 200, for the length of time that the Anglo-Saxons were here, we've got a death rate per year which represents a population of about 3,000 or 4,000. That's not enough people to prevent large-scale woodland regeneration. So there's got to be a large part of the population who were British and are not represented by these cemeteries. 5 of the graves contained these simple brooches. These are a British type. They're not an Anglo-Saxon type. Suggesting that there's this resurgence of Romano-British identity. We've got other things in Lindsay. We've got more British-style hanging bowls than anywhere else in Britain. We've got more of the type 1 penannular brooches than anywhere else in Britain. We've got more of these brooches in Lincolnshire than they've got anywhere in Wales, which suggests there's a British substrate. Grave 54 was remarkable. It contained up here an iron-bound bucket. It took me a week to redraw this. Julie did a beautiful job of conserving it, of getting it out. Also in the grave was a collection of glass waste, including this piece. Thank you. Piece of a Romano-British glass bracelet. Glass waste put together, including fragments that had been melted. Strange deposit. Even more strange, was found with the glass, are these. These are pebble garnets, found as a little collection. Not only the pebble garnets, but these are garnet crystals. These were probably imported from Bohemia. These could have come from Scotland. I mean, what did they mean? Why were they putting them in the graves? It took 25 years for us to get the funding to finish the conservation of the site. And these lovely beads came out, fitted nose to tail, fine gold beads. Because of the ground conditions, the silver mounts for these gems had decayed, just got scraps left. But the specialists who were interested in glass gems said it was so wonderful to be able to see the underside of them because the silver decayed. She'd got these 3 silver-mounted pendants in the grave. Now, context is everything. This is an aerial photograph taken towards the site. The site is down here. This is a Romano-British ladder-type field system. Remember the coins there that were found. A Romano-British ladder-type field system. That's it plotted out. It provides a context for it. It was land that was being worked. On the subject of the garnets, there were other strange things in the graves. We were getting worked flint. Now, with Sheffield's Hill being in the area, you know, there's a lot of worked flint around. But these weren't just bits of debitage. These were flint cores. It seems the Anglo-Saxons were a damn sight better at recognising worked flint than many archaeologists. They were picking up the good bits and putting them in graves, both in the 6th and 7th century cemetery. So there was an interest in that. We were getting iron slag in the graves, which they were picking out. Now, the context. I've mentioned the finds of Anglo-Saxon pots, cremations being found in the 1920s as the ironstone miners went through here. Now, Harold Dudley was curator at Scunthorpe Museum at the time, did what he could to record what was being found. The reports he was getting was there was a lot of pots, but they always say that, let's wind up the archives, that there were a lot of pots were being destroyed. But, you know, this was a grim job. They were paid by the cubic yard. They just had to keep moving, taking the stuff off. They couldn't be expected to stop for some old pots. But there are other things that suggest that this was a big cremation cemetery. Not just the stories. They're the pots that came out. But the position in the landscape. The cremation cemetery at Bagmore is right on a parish boundary. Other big cremation cemeteries in Lindsey are on a parish boundary. Cleetham is on the parish boundary between Manton and Curtin and Lindsey. South Alkington is South Alkington and Louth. They tend to be on a parish boundary. The other thing is they tend to be near a memorial, a place that went on to become an important memorial centre at Doomsday. Cleetham is next to Curtin and Lindsey, which was a mega centre. West Keel's near to Bolingbroke. Bagmore is near to West Holton. You know, it fits into a picture that this was a big cemetery of 5th century date. That would explain why we've not got really early graves in Sawcliffe 1. That it started in the 6th century. The 7th century stuff is down here at Bagmore. So that gives us 3 Anglo-Saxon cemeteries. It fits into a pattern of Anglo-Saxon cremation cemeteries in Lindsey. There's Lincoln. It's interesting that unlike other Roman cities, there are no early Anglo-Saxon cemeteries close to the city. York's got 2. It's got Heworth and the Mount. Leicester's got Thurmaston right under the walls. It seems that during the settlement period, someone in Lincoln said to the incomers, you can settle here, but no closer. Later on, in the 6th century, the cemeteries do move closer to Lincoln, but to begin with, they stay well clear. They also look like they're strategically positioned. Elsham controls the crossing of the Vale of Ancombe, a 2-mile wide bog. So it's strategically placed. Bagmore controls the rich area of Winterton Vale and the confluence of the Humber, Trent and Ouse. It's a strategically important place. And it might be why they had sufficient confidence to put in big mosaics in the 4th century. Then we move on to the final stage. In the late 1980s, planning permission was given to take away a sand dune for use as building sand. Work's already started, sand's being taken away from the site, but we knew this was an important spot. It's the site of Flixborough Old Church, or rather Conisbee Church. There is the original circular churchyard. The church was down here, taken down in the 18th century. And they moved from Conisbee to a more convenient site near the village of Flixborough. Well, finds had been made in this area in the 1930s, but in the 1980s we had no planning control over this, and all we had to do was respond as though we could ourselves. It was myself and Mrs. McGrath with her metal detector turned up. That's all we could do. We went out for conscience. We didn't think to find anything. I thought the oldest thing we were going to find was this bulldozer, which had got an early 1940s Second World War manufacturer's mark on it. We went out for a day. It poured with rain. We got soaked. I went back to the museum, leaving Irene to get on with it. Following morning, I had a phone call. She'd made a discovery. She'd found an Anglo-Saxon coin. She'd found an Anglo-Saxon square-headed brooch. And she'd found these human remains, together with iron coffin fittings. These were 8th century burials. There were 5 of them buried in iron-bound chests. There wasn't much left of the skeletons. They were orientated, they were laid out in Christian fashion. But it follows the pattern that we see at the 7th century cemetery at Sawcliffe 2. They're posh burials. There's a tendency at this time to move burial closer to the settlement, away from the field cemeteries. And I think this is the same people moving down, that this is 4 sequential cemeteries, the same level of society down here. On the strength of these graves, English Heritage paid for three months digging on the site to see what came out. 12 months later, we were still there. It was a phenomenal Anglo-Saxon, Middle Anglo-Saxon settlement. Very rich, large amounts of material culture, animal bones, pottery, metalwork, and an incredible level of preservation. We think it was because there's large amounts of ash being deposited on the site. Had allowed the stabilisation of iron and copper alloy. Got things like that, nice Mercian style brooch. But a really important site, continuing the line of settlement. In about 673, the area had a visitor, St. Ethelthryth, or Etheldreda, or St. Audrey, a very important woman. She had originally she was the daughter of King Anna of East Anglia, who was the son of Eni, who was the brother of King Raedwold, buried at Sutton Hoo. She was posh. Married circa 652 to Tonbert, alderman of the south, Geras, widowed, 655, retired as a nun to Ely. Then she was extracted from the monastery and married to King Edgefrith of Northumbria and preserved her virginity through all her marriages, which weren't altogether happy. 672, she left Edgefrith and became a king at Coldingham and then travelled south down to Ely. On the way, she crossed the Humber at Wintringham and stayed for some time at Altham, which is here, West Halton. The church there is dedicated to St. Etheldreda, and we've got a site in the area. It was discovered when they bulldozed a lot of earthworks to make a football pitch and found masses of Anglo-Saxon and Roman pottery. Jane Grenville and Mike Parker Pearson organised an excavation on the site. Unfortunately, it ran into really well-preserved high medieval remains. Subsequently, work's been done on the site by Dawn Hadley and people from Sheffield. But an important site with a ditch around it. This must date from the period when St. Ethelthryth was in the area. Now, think about it. She may have been a nun with a vow of poverty and all of that, but she was the daughter of the king and the wife of a king. She would have not gone anywhere where her level of society was not represented. There was somebody posh in this corner who could provide the sort of society that she was used to. There was something going on here. Yeah, we're on a good time. So we've got a possible monastery down here at Conisby, Flixborough. We've got a likely monastery up here at West Halton. Then we begin to look at parish boundaries. Look at the shape of West Halton. It's a rag of a thing. It's thought to be the original mother parish from which all of the other parishes were cut, leaving behind this poor rag. In the late 17th century, the ruins of the old church at West Halton were seen by Abraham de la Prime, who said it was a big church. One wonders if it was a minster. Still more strange, down here, we've got part of West Halton parish, which is detached right next to the Anglo-Saxon site. These are part of the same estate. If we look at the parish boundary between all of the parishes here, between Witton and Wintringham, West Halton, Winterton, the parish boundary is always Winterton Beck. Good marker on the landscape. Until you get to Flixborough, where the Flixborough/Conisby parish boundary extends to the east 400 metres to the top of the ridge to abut the Anglo-Saxon cemeteries. Did they want to maintain interest, a link with the old burial ground. This is appalling land on the escarpment. Why else would they extend across other than having an interest at the top of the cliff? So what have we got? We've got 2 Iron Age settlements, Dragonby and Old Wintringham, 2 Roman villas, Roxby up here, that I hadn't referred to in Winterton, Roman fort, possibly at Aldborough, defensive structure, large 5th century cremation cemetery at Bagmore, 6th century cemetery at Sawcliffe 1, 7th century cemetery at Sawcliffe 2, an 8th century cemetery at Conisby, important Middle Saxon settlement at Flixborough, 1 Anglo-Saxon monastery at Westhalton, and a lot of background noise. There's a lot going on here. The Hidden Valley existed. It was important at the time. All of the data is available on the Archaeological Data Services website. You can look at all the finds there. A book has been written, a synopsis, which is with a publisher, and it's a good tale. Right, bang on time, Julian. You've got no to shout at me.
Just yes, wait for the mic, thanks.
Hello. Quite early on you mentioned something about the Anglo-Saxons being better archaeologists than us at picking up flint and, and such and putting it in the graves. And also iron slag, I believe you mentioned?
Yes, it's interesting that we were getting iron slag in the fill of the graves, but very little of it was coming out of the topsoil. It was being brought up from the ironworking sites at the bottom and put into the graves. We noticed this at Cleetham Anglo-Saxon Cemetery. They also they included iron slag in the fill of the graves and in the fill of their pottery. They were including iron slag.
Right.
There's an antiquarian interest in the Anglo-Saxons. You get Roman pottery in Anglo-Saxon urns.
So my question is there any contemporary evidence from the time that tells us why they were doing this, why they were interested specifically in iron slag, which we find to be particularly worthless today, and what they thought those flints were, why they were putting them in their graves in the first place?
I've no idea, but it occurs elsewhere. We get antiquarian finds. The Anglo-Saxons, well, a greyware sherd in an Anglo-Saxon urn. Flint cores. They were ignoring all of the natural flint on the site. It was work flint that they were interested in. It's a very interesting practice.
Could I just ask something? When you talked about one of the early cemeteries, you said that you initially thought that the pottery might be settlement debris.
Yes.
Is this the big problem, that we have cemeteries, but we haven't got the actual settlements? Or do you think, and the other thing is, are there more cemeteries there to be discovered, do you think? Or do you think is this the whole pattern?
There are more cemeteries, there are more inhumation cemeteries are being discovered. The metal detectorists are picking them up. I don't think there are any more cremation cemeteries. The cremation cemeteries are big and have a very distinctive signature, even from metal detectorists. The finds is copper alloy melt and tweezers. A metal detectorist would pick up. Cleetham was just a massive busted pot, and that was a well-preserved cemetery. Yeah. I don't think we're going to get any more. Now, at Cleetham, we carried out intensive field walking around the cemetery, and we got a lot of settlement evidence, bits of pottery. There were settlements all around, and work done in the interwar years during ironstone extraction to the west of the site was producing settlement debris. There's the hut site, quite substantial areas of settlement debris down at the bottom. So yes, they're gone, but we've got, 120 sherds, and loom weight fragments. Yeah,
because settlements of this period are not as archaeologically visible, are they?
No, they're not.
No.
But we're getting loom weight fragments which only occur on
Yes.
settlement sites.
Okay. Any other? Yes, the gentleman at the back.
Hi, Kevin. I'm interested, you said that the 7th century cemeteries have different character in the material culture in the graves.
Yes.
What I'm interested in was in recent years, we've had the discovery of an Anglo-Saxon cemetery in Doncaster. But the nature of the finds in the graves, where there are any at all, is completely different to those that you're getting in North Lincolnshire. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts really on why there was that difference between the two places.
Is it the 7th century or the 6th century graves are different, Pete?
The 7th century.
One has to say that Sawcliffe 2 is very unusual by the standards of the 7th century. The fact that 86% of the graves contain grave goods cannot be paralleled. Places like Chamberlain's Barn and Winnell are not producing finds on this scale. And it's not just a single knife, but most of the graves contain 3 artifact types. These are good graves. And I think what you've got, Pete, is the norm, and there's something odd going on in the Hidden Valley with this very rich environment, and I think it was financially rich because they could get grain out and sell it. Yeah. They got things going for them.
Okay. Really? A couple of people down the front. We've got.
Thank you. I was just noting those 2 place names, Winterton and Wintringham, and I'm wondering if there's something there suggesting seasonal settlement.
No.
Not at all.
No, it's still more interesting than that, because we've got a genealogy of Aldfrith, a king of Lindsey, which goes back, and it includes a personal name called Wintrer. And it's been linked to him. That I'm unsure about this. Other people are unsure about whether or not the winter element can be linked to this person on the 8th century genealogy. But it goes right back to Woden and earlier. So it's nothing to do with winter. Winteringham is a sort of second tier place name. Winterton is later.
Yeah, okay, there was lady conveniently next to you.
It is very good. It kind of links. Could you help geographically for me to understand the movement of people coming into the Humber, like Abbess Hugh from Hartlepool to found the double monastery further along, through to Tadcaster, and also for the Kentish sort of Juttish people that would they have had it as a layover before going on to the rivers of, the Ouse or the Trent, or would there be lots of other settlements along the Humber where it was more obvious that they would have stopped over?
It's very difficult. Remember that the Lincolnshire coast is inhospitable. Landing is difficult. You've got the long beaches, and even when you get this thing, you've got the massive marshlands. The Humber is not an easy place to land. You've got the havens, but elsewhere you've got long, deep mud flats. The people in the Hidden Valley would have used Wintringham Haven, where the Beck enters and enters the Humber. There is movement up the coast. A colleague has suggested that Lindisfarne is linked to the Kingdom of Lindsey and was settled from Lindsey. Kate's a very good philologist, and she's certainly got some strong arguments for that the settlement was coming up. But in through the Humber is a wide gate into Yorkshire and into the English Midlands.
Kevin, I'm very interested in this in some of the grave goods, the association, I mean, obviously you haven't got the skeletal remains,
Yes.
sadly, because of the soil conditions, to be able to look at those. But, you know, this idea of women's graves, man's graves, based on what's there with them. And I noted that you said something about the fact that children's graves seem to be associated with pottery.
Yes.
Why is this? Is this because they're children, because they haven't developed that identity?
No, I think it's because I think children relied on adults for their sustenance.
So you think this is why
Yeah,
the food is there?
I think so.
Oh, because I just remember at Lakenheath Cemetery, they had children's graves with full-size adult weapons in them. Now, is that saying that this child is going to grow up into this person, you know, even though they died young?
What date was that?
Isn't that 6th, 7th century?
We've got at Castledyke South a young man in his early teens buried as a weapon. He's 7th century and he's buried as a warrior, which is quite important because it's clear that he had inherited, not achieved status.
That was what I was saying. So,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you're born into a
Yeah.
class, and therefore, when you die, even if you die young, you're buried with those objects.
Yes, it's inherited status.
Okay. And do you think that things like those garnet, you know, those rough garnets and things like that, are they indicators of a person's trade? Was that person maybe a jeweller who would have used those, and therefore he was buried with them? I mean,
She.
Oh, right.
It was a woman.
That was a female.
Yes.
That was a woman's grave.
Yes.
Right. Oh dear. I'm making. I'm going to get into trouble for that, aren't I? Making gender stereotypes. Yeah. Right. So, but do you think that's the case? Do you think that that's why that woman was buried with those?
It's very difficult to say. When we get these purse deposits with all manner of things in them, like Roman brooches and things, we've got. We haven't got that at Sawcliffe. What we have got at Sawcliffe, which is most odd, is a 7th century cremation, right. which I missed during the excavation, and it was only when we got the bone report that we found out it was human bone. I must have thought that the deposit was important because I expended 5 slides on it. So. Clearly on the site there was something going on.
So that person was Christian?
It's difficult. Were they Christian, were they pagan, or were they both, like Raidwell?
Yeah. Okay, because that transitional period's interesting, isn't it, in terms of the burial practices?
But to see them move from the 5th century cremation cemetery to the 6th century inhumation cemetery, 20 metres to the south, abandoning their ancestors to move 20 metres to the south, and then moving down 1.8 kilometres down to Conisby with the chest burials. You know, and it's the same population moving, because very often we're linking together developments in disparate areas. But here, it's probably the same people going through these transitions.
Yeah, I've hogged that. Has anybody else got any questions that they'd like to ask? There's somebody 4 rows up, gentlemen.
Thank you for the talk. I was just wondering, considering what you mentioned about the British nature of the site and the potential for exports and the nature of the finds, whether you might be able to comment on the connections potentially of the site with the continent and to what extent they might have changed over time. And I was also just wondering if there's any mention in the written evidence, say, of charter evidence about the site that could reveal a bit more?
There's no charter evidence, but what we can rely on is the fact that West Halton was a soak centre at Doomsday. That suggests a level of importance. We've got the references to St Ethelfrith coming in, which is from Bede. So that's a pretty good evidence. Continental material, not a lot. We've got a gold coin from the same period, which is struck at Metz, which is quite interesting. But I'm thinking of direct, not a lot. there.
Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, if anybody else... No? Well, Kevin, thank you once again for... I think, as I said at the beginning, what this has done is it's emphasised both the power of objects, the power to tell stories, to tell the story of these people, their change, their migration, their changing in beliefs. I mean, this is what's so fascinating. And also, really, what we're still discovering through not only new actual archaeological discoveries, but through the sort of science that helps us to understand these things much more. So, wonderful. Great bit of storytelling. Thank you very much indeed, Kevin. Thank you.